centers.
Yeah, the organization is working on that right now. There is no question that technology is going to overcome this sooner or later. Anyway, we have to take it with a grain of salt because then, we have everything classified and the WikiLeaks go off. So, I mean, we have to really, but technology will catch up with that. That is an impediment right now, but that won't last forever.
Just wanted to throw those
Yes,
in the
right,
mix.
right.
Well, I don't know, maybe, I'm sure whether Ian or I, let's take a
Yes.
few more questions and then we might have to wrap up here. See what schedules.
Should be green. If you press on it, it should turn green.
Oh, yep,
There.
it's on. Yep.
Maria Eustace, I work in HRC level. Getting back to the learning disabilities with kids, this was a big focus of mine because I was 12 in Guatemala. And also, our son first got diagnosed with some issues in Fairfax County before he went to Bolivia. Things were going along really well. We hit Bolivia and the school was going through a major transition that the Office of Overseas Schools was having issues with. So my question is, and what I was trying to do when I was in Guatemala, was to try to get the Office of Overseas School a little bit more into the whole idea, the fact that this learning disability thing is not just for U.S. kids. There were kids in Bolivia who had issues, and the school itself just didn't want to face it. It's like, well, if they just work harder, it's almost like the 20 years ago that we were at in the United States. And I was trying to stress upon everybody, it's like, well, I can see prime examples on this kid or that kid because I was a substitute teacher for a while at school in Bolivia. So my question or my interest would be is knowing that the Office of Overseas Schools could address some more things with this situation and possibly incorporate things in systems that are in like Fairfax County or other counties so that you have a system at the schools because this is not a problem that's going to go away.
Is there anyone from overseas? I don't see anyone from overseas schools. I think I can partially address that. One of the major problems is that the Office of Overseas Schools actually do the best that they possibly can, and they're really strong advocates for our kids. The bottom line, though, is that these are not public schools.
Right.
These are all private schools overseas, and they don't have to provide any of those services, just as private schools in the United States don't have to provide any of those services. So the regional education officers can absolutely, and they do, go to the schools, try to encourage them to establish programs, to hire special ed teachers. But the bottom line is, even the schools that are State Department assisted, frankly, we give them peanuts.
Right.
So there's really no incentive for them unless they're getting pressure from somewhere else for the few kids that we have that we would like to have served there.
But even as a Chloe in Guatemala, just being there for 2 years, it went from almost just maybe a couple families to it turned out to almost every family to become there. I have a kid with special needs. And you can't start denying families to go overseas because their kid has something that's maybe, some kids have really big issues to deal with, and maybe the family should reconsider that. It almost seems like some thought needs to go into that process of it.
Well, and that's part of the reason why they're supposed to go through the clearance with ECS and so on, and to make sure before they go,
Right.
are the services there, or is there somebody in the community? Because that's the other thing. It doesn't have to be somebody at the school. And unfortunately, I think you were talking earlier about advocacy, and I think advocacy is something that FLO does, the Office of Overseas Schools does, AFSA does, AFSW does, ER in different ways. But I think that the individual parents also have to take on that advocacy role. And just for any special ed parents that are in the room, the Office of Overseas Schools has a great publication about parent advocacy that's on their internet website. And I would say that that's something that people need to think about as well in the Foreign Service. All of these different offices can advocate, but there's only a certain amount we can accomplish. And in the end, it's got to be each parent educating themselves and advocating on their own behalf directly with schools and with posts.
In Guatemala, the school's great. They work, you can combine the parent with some schools.
Well done.
Something.
Well done.
But if I can make a point also with this issue, even after you go through the assignments process and the post ostensibly has the programs that will support your child's needs, that still doesn't mean that the school's going to accept your child.
Right.
And sometimes the parent is still left holding the bag. We've just gone through that with one of our AFSA spelling people, and finally she's been able to get a school for her son. But she was at the point where they were talking about her staying back in the United States with the child, because there's always that issue. The school, because it's a private school,
They don't
has the
have-
right to make the decision
I just
to
wish
accept
there
or
was some
reject
other
the
way
child.
to develop that. I know, like I would say to most people, it's gonna be in the development stage, it's 10, 20 years maybe down the road, but it's facing everybody.
I mean, a lot of the schools like to have, they like to have the college prep school image. They don't really like to advertise that they also provide special needs, so. There's a question over here.
I just want to say some things that are being done that you might not be aware of are that FSI has started doing workshops twice a year, and it's educating your child with special needs overseas, where they bring all the experts together with the parents. And it's only been going on for 4 years, but they're really good, and you can see it on BNet too. And the other thing is, I'm all for advocating. I have a child with special needs, and I started parent support groups at both of my posts, and got parents and the embassy groups together, and then approached the school. And one last quick thing is, even though you have IEPs and the law on your side here, I got a lot of really unique services overseas that I would never have gotten here. And my child passed physics because the principal liked me. That's the only reason. And I mean, you would never get that in Fairfax County, so.
Actually, I have a question. How many people have children that don't have special needs? I mean, it's a bit of an epidemic, and I think there are studies that are, you know, whether it's environmental or food related or whatever, but there are lots of children.
Well, it's also a perception, I think, a greater perception of something that's been around for a long time. I remember when my son was diagnosed with ADHD, my father said, "Oh my God, you know, I must have had that when I was."
We're much better at diagnosing
Yeah.
and identifying.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to interrupt this, because I see that, you know, there's a lot to discuss and a lot of conversation. So I want to thank all of you, and I'm going to just turn for a moment to all of our panelists and Faye. Thank all of you. It's been great having you. I hope this is just sort of a continuation of some connections that started with Margot, but that, you know, we're coming together and we can find ways to continue this conversation. And all of you who've been here, I mean, I'd like to tell people to leave their cards, you know, if they had them in the bowl, which we don't have. But I guess we do have a list of RSVPs and things like that, because we'd like to kind of, you know who it is out there who's interested in some of these issues, has some questions or something to contribute. But I think it's been a very useful discussion, and unfortunately there's so many issues out there, we probably only touched on some small portion of them. But thanks very much to you, Kathleen, for some of the, I really personally appreciated the little insights onto how to look at changing cultures, because that's something that AFSA is concerned with, and how to do it in a constructive way, and how do we somehow connect and organize the people who are out there, and in a way that helps management, helps the institution. So I think that's been very helpful, and I may try to look into that course and see if we can take it. Anyway, so thank you all very much. It's been great. Thank you, Faye. Thanks, Judy, Margot, and Steve, all of you, and Flo, Leslie, and your folk over there. Really appreciate it, and all the audience. You've been all been great. So thanks a lot.